This piece of paper arguably changed the course of Formula One history in the early 1990s. It's a letter from Michael Schumacher to Eddie Jordan that Schumacher's management and Eddie believe is the reason he got out of the contract he had with the team after just one race to move to Benetton. I've got Gary Anderson and Edd Straw with me to talk about this piece of paper. Gary, you were technical director of the team at the time, designing the beautiful Jordan 191 that Schumacher made his debut in. But I believe that before today you've not seen this piece of paper before. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. I obviously heard about some wording that was incorrect, and that was why we lost him as such. But at the end of the day, you know, the intention was probably never there, to be honest.
Okay.
Because in meeting Michael at the workshop and making a seat from him and sitting down talking to him, I never really got the feeling that, you know, he was going to be with us. There was too much attention paid whenever we got to Spa about Nelson Piquet's grid position. Little things just sort of added up in your mind. Okay, it's after the fact, you can put all those bits of the jigsaw together. But I think the intention was there even before the day at Spa for him, or the weekend at Spa for him. And it sort of means, I think, this was his way into Formula One. It was his way to show his true wares. That was important for him, but he did a great job for Jordan.
I'll read what's considered the key line of this letter. It says, "Dear Eddie, I confirm that if you enter me in the 1991 Belgian Grand Prix, which is of course what happened, and he started 7th and shone in a brief appearance in the race, I will sign," and this is the key bit, "I will sign a driver agreement with you prior to Monza in respect of my services in 1991, 1992, 1993, and subject to Mercedes' first option, 1994. The key change is that the word "the" was replaced with "a", and that's what Schumacher's management say. That meant they could sign any agreement with Jordan. I think the quote Willy Weber gave us years ago when Motorsport News first uncovered this was that they could have signed an agreement to visit Jordan's Silverstone factory twice and have lunch with Eddie or something like that. It could be any agreement. Can you believe that something so small can get you out of a contract?
Well, it's difficult to believe. I'm not a great expertise in legalese, but if you look at that there, Eddie at that point in time had a driver management company as well. So what Michael sort of says there, I think, is that I will sign a driver agreement with you. Right. He doesn't say I will sign a driver agreement with Jordan. So the wording is a bit strange, and I think probably you can fight it for that. But, you know, if the intent wasn't there anyway, and to be honest, you know, we had a great weekend at Spa with him, and if the clutch hadn't failed after the start, there is a very good chance he could have won the race, which would have been a fantastic story. But we had Yamaha engines for the next year, so probably the best thing for his career was to move on, because it definitely was it was a ship's anchor, to be honest.
Well, that's the thing, Ed. You wrote some pieces over the winter around Michael's 50th birthday about the early years that almost get overlooked. The Ferrari era is what defined Schumacher's career in the end, but he won 2 world championships with Benetton, who were not a championship-winning team up to that point. Do you think that getting out of Jordan in the way that he did and getting to Benetton so quickly, did that define the early part of his career and perhaps even the later stages as well?
Well, certainly the early part. It got him into a championship-winning situation much earlier than he otherwise would have done. Benetton was a team that was used to winning the odd race here and there, but it needed a driver capable of helping to lift them to the next level. The team itself was continuing to get better, and of course Schumacher won the Belgian Grand Prix in 92, won the Portuguese Grand Prix in 93, and then in 1994 there he was, world champion, and then winning again in 95. So it was the perfect move in a way for Schumacher, because it put him into a team that needed to get behind him, that couldn't go and sign a superstar driver in their prime. Of course Nelson Piquet was there, but very much on his decline, and in fact Schumacher's arrival kind of finished things off for Nelson Piquet in Formula One, who had actually won a race that year and won a couple at the end of the previous season. But it gave Schumacher that opportunity. It's right, here's a team that could amount to something, that could be a title contender. You're the young guy who's going to get out there, win the races, win the titles for us. And that was a great opportunity for Schumacher. And I think even if he'd retired for some reason, which would have been very odd, at the end of 95, he would stand not quite as highly as he does among the greats, but you'd still say, wow, this guy was sensational. What he did there was incredible. You might expect a driver who's been there, done that, to go to an emerging team and lead them to 2 championships. But for a driver who hadn't been there and done that, I think that's just testament to the quality of Michael Schumacher.
Now, we all know that Schumacher completely changed the game in terms of dedication, preparation, his ruthlessness, everything. Perhaps in this situation, was this an early example of the way he approached his career, in the fact that do anything you can to get yourself into a better situation immediately. Some drivers would say, I'll start at Jordan, I'll start with a good up-and-coming team, and I'll find my way in Formula One, but not Schumacher. The second he's in Formula One, he's through the door, as Gary said, and then it's get me to Benetton, get me in a race-winning car.
I think this is what we see from those kinds of drivers. In more recent years, Max Verstappen has done this, forcing himself into Toro Rosso, then forcing himself into the Red Bull A team. He wants to get there quickly. Michael Schumacher wanted the same thing. Jordan was a great team. 91 was an outstanding season, but it wasn't a team that could be realistically expected to contend for a championship in the medium term. Obviously, they started to win races. 98 was the first win. 99 was very, very strong, but he couldn't afford to wait that long, could he? He could see Benetton was an emerging team. He could see that was the place to be, went there, did the job, got into Ferrari. That's kind of why Spa 91 is the starting point for everything Schumacher achieved. He was a great driver. He'd, I'm sure, still have had success without that race, but that got him into Benetton quickly, changed the course of his career and changed the course of Formula One in the 90s, because there's no way he'd have been, in 94, the best driver on the grid, or regarded as it, had he either stayed with Jordan or, as the contract did allow, he could have gone, because he had a Mercedes contract, so he could have ended up at Sauber when they came into Formula One in 93. So yeah, a huge thing, and I think that ruthlessness, that get me in a car that can win races, that can win championships because I'm ready, reflects his ruthlessness and also his confidence, because some drivers might have liked to learn in an easier environment. Jordan, always a great team for young drivers to learn in. Expectations weren't super high, but he's like, no, I'm going to go where I can win, because there's an opportunity. I'm going to show I can be world champion in a few years.
Gary, contracts obviously weren't part of your bag. I'm sure they weren't in your job description that Eddie Jordan may or may not have given you at some point in your time at the team. So when did people like yourself and the people in the factory become aware that something was up contractually? You said you had a hunch from the start that maybe he wasn't that committed, but when did you get word back at Silverstone that maybe something really was up?
Well, it wasn't actually back at Silverstone. It was actually at Monza at the next race.
All right.
In the paddock on the Thursday, I believe, to be honest. That we started there's something going on, and Michael didn't show up, and we thought, what's happening here? And then through a few hours went past, and basically we discovered that it was still a bit of a fight going on between Jordan and Benetton, and Bernie was in the middle of it, Bernie Eccleston. So we ended up then swapping drivers basically, with Roberto Moreno coming to drive the Jordan. But that sort of happened overnight as such, on the Thursday night ready for Friday. So Roberto coming in to jump in the Jordan, a car I'd never driven before, with no sleep overnight, worrying about his future. It wasn't the best environment, I must say, but it happened. And Michael, you're talking about talent there, Ed. Just from the first laps in the car at Silverstone testing, you knew he just had confidence in himself and his ability. And then you go to Spa, and at that time El Rouge was theoretically flat out, but we were a new team, and that's what you set your challenge as. As a new team, you wanted to see if you could take El Rouge flat out. And on the first day, on the Friday, we said at night to Andrea de Cesaris and Michael, you haven't been through El Rouge flat yet. Michael said, oh yeah, no problem, just getting confidence in the car. Andrea said, oh yeah, no problem. The next morning, Saturday morning, Michael was flat from the first lap, never lifted again. Andrea took, I think, until the last lap of qualifying before he did it. So, you could feel the confidence within himself, and it was very impressive.
Now, one of the things that Schumacher's then management team cited when MN spoke to them about this the first time was the Yamaha engines that Jordan had to run in 1992. It took away, or it certainly took the team a step backwards from where they were in the first season. Do you think that if Michael had been in the car, would anything more have been possible? Was that season always a little bit doomed just through the engine selection?
It was doomed for a couple of reasons, really. We, as a team in 1991, our job was to build a car during 1990, get it running. We got it running, I think it was middle of November, and then go racing in 1991. And then it's a whole different task whenever you've got to design a new car and race as well. And we were still a very small team. During 1991, we used to take 27 people away to a race meeting, and we had 28 people total, and we used to just leave one behind to switch the lights on and off. So we were still very small, trying to do far too much, to be honest. But the Yamaha engine was, in theory, our saviour as a team, because financially we were a bit strapped. 1991 cost the team a lot more money than Eddie had imagined. So it was very important to get some assistance from a works team. So although the Yamaha situation was not good for the performance of the team, it meant the team was still in existence, which is very important. Michael couldn't have made any difference with it, to be honest. We had two things. We had an engine that was, as I said earlier, a bit of a ship's anchor. Very inconsistent, blew up, if you blow on it wrong, it seized up, basically. And we had a gearbox problem as well. It took us quite a while to sort out. So in general, no, Michael couldn't have made a difference.